Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America, brought to you by Accuracy in Academia. I am your host, Don Irvine, joined always by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, semi-fascist, maggots, and of course those dog-faced pony soldiers.
Okay, so I'll switch that order. I guess it actually has more fluid. I guess that dog-faced pony soldiers at the end.
That's the best. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great line. All right, weather check. Boy, I mean, we're March 19th is supposed to be the first day of spring. We're at February 28th. We're almost to end of February. We've got a leap year this year. So we've got 20 days, just basically 3 weeks, just under 3 weeks till the official first day of spring for whatever that's worth. It's looking pretty spring-like right now.
But it's looking pretty spring-like now. Yeah, we got it. It looks like, so there's a bunch of solar activity going on. I don't know if you follow that, but man, the sun is pretty angry for some reason. It's kicking out some heavy voltage. So weather really could be crazy for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. It could be really, you can see some stuff you haven't seen in a while, good and bad. But one of the things is like we were setting up for a big El Nino, and now it's all disappearing, and La Nina is rushing back in, and so the result here is that like last night I think it was the warmest, the low temperature for this date ever. So warm weather, warm nights. Now I think the front passes through pretty soon, and then it goes back to being winter. But winter's losing its grip, right? The days are getting longer. Not this Sunday, but next Sunday is the start of daylight savings time. Is that right?
I think that's about right. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe not. Maybe this Sunday. But anyway, that's to me, that's a good sign of spring. So, I'm happy with it. I got to play a little golf last weekend. About to get to play some more, as it gets warmer. And so I'm for it. I support warm weather.
we're in favor
I think
of this.
That's an uncontroversial stance, but other people like the snow, and I can't work with those
people. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's like I was telling my wife this morning. I was like, it's like it looks like we may have escaped the worst of it. I mean, March can still be a little tricky around here.
There's even April, and you can get a little snow,
right,
but
right. There's no guarantee, but when you make it all the way through the end of February and you've had as little snow as we've had, it makes me pretty optimistic that the rest of this time is not going to be all that bad. I mean, and you look at the rest of the week, and I think the temperature drops a little bit tomorrow, but then it starts to zip back up again, and I'm thinking like this is great. I love it. I mean,
lots of 50s and 60s for the highs, and lows in the 40s and whatnot. Doesn't get that cold at night, so
yeah. I mean, if we're setting new records for the overnight lows, kind of a thing like that, that's pretty amazing too. So that's good. I like it. I don't like the snow, and if I don't have to use my snow blower that much during the course of my lifetime or whatever, I'm perfectly fine.
Yeah, I hear you.
So that's just that cranky old age thing. I don't need this anymore in my life. As you said, when you moved, you got away from all that stuff.
That's right.
And all. Well, that's good. I mean, and we know. I mean, you're a huge baseball fan. You're a huge sports fan overall, and I love sports too. But this just always leads me. It's like it makes spring training, and you can smell the baseball. The opening day is coming. It's around the corner. All of these things, and it's a lot easier, or at least we get more excited about it when the weather is like this. We're like, oh man, when we can't wait.
You can picture yourself sitting outside watching a game.
Right, yeah, and so it's kind of an exciting time period, and yeah, I'm very thankful for a very mild winter after thinking that we were going to have something that was going to be a lot more severe than we've had. So we may have escaped the worst of it. We shall see. But I'm thankful for all of that. So we've now, we had last week, we were just short of the 2-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine. So we're now a little bit beyond that. Things are still kind of slogging along. Ukraine and Zelensky are still pleading for more money, more aid. It's kind of bogged down here in the U.S. A lot of it, we talked about this a little bit too. That the sentiment seems to be shifting. For the election, is this going to be a big deal in your mind in terms of this aid?
I think that like it's really weird to hear like the Democrats being the pro-war party, after all these years. But I think that both sides are just going to get behind what their candidate wants, right? I think it's hard to argue that, I was all for standing up to it, right, to helping the Ukrainians, whatnot. But we've got to a point where they can't, if you want to win, if you want to drive Russia out of the territory it holds in Ukraine now, right, that's a massive commitment. That's $60 billion or $61 billion, whatever they're talking about on Capitol Hill, is a pinprick, isn't it? And as people point out, it basically pays U.S. arms manufacturers to fill the orders, right? Refill what we have and make some for them. Okay, it's like, well, we should be running government to help arms manufacturers, right? We should not be taxing Americans so that we can have the money to sponsor our arms manufacturers. If they make their money, they make their money. If they don't, they don't. But that's not the kind of like business we need to keep afloat necessarily. I guess at some level you do for national security purposes, but that we're far from that, right? We're just adding to bottom line, So I don't understand now, like, where it is. And the other thing about this is the speaker has kind of grown up in the last few weeks, right? We were talking, a month ago about him getting, knocked around by this controversy and that controversy, but he's sitting on 2 bills right now against all the pressure of the president, the Democrats, Republicans in the Senate. They've negotiated these bills, and they called him in yesterday and berated him for 3 hours to pass the bills. You got to put these bills on the floor. And he's like, we're working on stuff and we'll do it in due time. But he stood right up to the president, the majority leader of the Senate, the minority leader of the Senate, who was there, like as one, it was like 3 against 1. It shouldn't even be like that. So, or 4 against 1 with Jeffries there. He's standing his ground on this, and I think he's right. I think he's doing what his voters want him to do. The other thing is about this, about both Ukraine and the other legislation that Johnson is holding up, which is the immigration legislation, right, is both of these bills were negotiated with no input from half the country, right? MAGA is half the country now, right? You look at the vote totals, Trump got 755,000 votes in Michigan last night, right? The previous record in a primary was 595,000 by Bernie. Now, Joe broke it too. Joe got a little over 6, right? But Trump got, way more, like half again as much as the previous record vote total in a primary last night, right? But when it came to negotiating these 2 bills, the people that represents, no one talked to them, right? They talked to James Lankford and Mitch McConnell in the Senate, and they considered that. They checked the box. We discussed this with Republicans. We got Republican buy-in. Well, no, you didn't. You got James Lankford and Mitch McConnell. You got Rhino buy-in, but you did not get MAGA buy-in. You didn't even try. So now you're asking Johnson, who is close to representing MAGA as anybody in public life right now, to say, okay, we can get any say in this. We didn't get what we want out of it. It doesn't really close the border, but I'll bring it up and vote for it anyway. No, that's not how this works. Right? He's doing leadership. He's making Congress take the concerns of half the country, the half represented by MAGA, seriously.
Yeah, I just want to go back to Ukraine too. Because we've been talking about this. We talked about this a little bit last week too. So, I still feel that we're just at this point where, we can keep throwing money and material at Ukraine, but it's really not going to make much difference at this point without troops on the ground. I mean, and until somebody commits
massive commitment.
Yeah, I mean that's it. That's the only way you have got to have this big pushback against Russia. Otherwise, Putin can just hold out, toy with us. I think I mentioned last week. I mean, he was going into Africa, into Cuba, and every place else, going to find soldiers, people, they can throw out there, basically expendable people. Ukraine doesn't have that luxury of being able to do that. So, over time, Ukraine loses. I mean, they will continue to lose ground, and they eventually lose the entire country. Putin knows that he's kind of got the upper hand in this. Despite the fact that they've got NATO support for money and material, but without troop support, it's just not going to go anywhere. And that's a tricky thing because Ukraine is not part of NATO officially, right? So they didn't want to to go in there and support a non-NATO country at this point. So there's all these ramifications and political justering and whatever. They're kind of moving around and all this stuff, but it's kind of like with all these NATO aligned countries, especially the ones that are on the border of Russia. It's like, what are you going to do? I mean, it's like, are you going to keep doing this and just hoping that they can hold the line, or watch this gradual push by Putin into Ukraine, and maybe eventually taking off, lopping off some of your other territories too, if he feels like it. Something has got to give at some point. I just don't know really when. But I mean, I was all for it at the beginning, and I have I do definitely have an understanding of why Republicans and others are pushing back a little bit on all of this. But you're right too. It's like to see the Democrats being kind of the pro-war party as the Republicans slip into more of why are we doing this is a kind of a weird thing to see for us. This is not something that we're used to seeing at all.
It seems pretty nakedly political. It's just because it's trying to help Joe.
Yeah, I think at this point, they try to shore him up and everything like this. So, and we also, as we look at
the question to ask though is, okay, if we give them the 61 billion, will that help? Is it going to turn the tide? Can we start getting, retaking some of these territories? Well, no, it'll hold our ground. Okay, so what does it cost to actually help? Right? It's not just more money out the door, but we start getting some results. We start seeing Ukraine retake stuff. Okay, well, that's a lot more money. Is anybody willing to pay that kind of money for this? I don't think so. Yeah.
I mean, and that's how you open up the spigots a little bit more, is that you see Ukraine having success of pushing back and, retaking their territory, but they just, at this point they've lost 31,000, soldiers and, or something like that. This is getting harder. It's a small country. There's a limited number of people they can throw at this. Russia's in a different position. They already had a big army, and they just, emptied their prisons, did a whole bunch of other things. So they keep throwing people at this, and it becomes kind of a war of attrition with that.
Right. That's how the Russians always fight. That's how they fought. Like in World War II, we lost 155,000 guys. The Russians lost 22 million. So I mean, that's degrees of scale. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're willing to lose a lot of people to win a war.
Yeah, there's oh no! What was that?
Lots of things went wrong there.
All at the same time.
Yeah. All right. Get that light back. Okay.
All right, we'll just proceed.
Keep working on it here. There we go. Maybe. I got a shaky stick here, actually. Yeah. Let me say that on the air. All right, so keep it in my lap. Make it work.
Oh, there we go.
I had it. Please, baby.
This is the beauty of live streaming, right?
That's right. You get all the stuff.
See, we're genuine this way, right?
That's right. No stagecraft here, baby. Whatsoever.
No, the next thing I was going to say too is that with regard to Russia is that Evan Gershkovich is still being held. It's
Right.
been 336 days. I mean, we're almost at a year mark. We're basically a month away from hitting the 1 year mark since he's been detained. You know, they have these hearings, which are basically a sham, and they keep saying, no, we're going to continue to detain him, because they charge him with espionage. This is I don't know. I mean, I find all of this just crazy, but
Right.
but Putin's got. I don't know what it's going to take to free Evan Gershkovich at this point.
Them deciding to do it, we don't have any leverage over them.
Yeah,
They don't really care about the people we have up there. So, they got what they wanted out of Griner. So, they don't really care about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody that they're holding, they really are kind of these political prisoners. Is that when they finally decide that they want to release them, they'll release them unless there's something else that they can get out of it that they can leverage.
They'll wait till there's something they can get out of it.
Yeah,
that's all.
Right. So it's an unfortunate thing there. Still no ceasefire in Gaza. Growing calls for that.
Including from the president.
Including from the president. So he thinks he's close on this, and I don't think we've talked about this numerous times too. It's just there's really not a lot that it's in Israel's favor because there's still hostages out there. We think that they're still alive. We don't know if they're still alive at this point. But once again, it's this continued narrative by the left, by the media, that that Hamas and the people and the people in the Strip are all innocent victims of this, completely ignoring who started this whole business.
Right. That's right.
And it's just a real tragedy to see this go on like this. But I don't know that I see a clear end in sight, because I think Netanyahu has really tried to dig in here and everything like that. But it doesn't seem that the message about Israel, I think, has taken some care with in terms of what they've been trying to do. But Hamas, they will use civilians as shields and place them in places where they're in harm's way, and then use them to say, see, look, Israel's killed more civilians and stuff like that. But
always according to the Gaza Health Ministry.
Right. It's always right. That's always the official
Baghdad Bob of the conflict.
Right. Exactly. Right. Exactly. Like they
have any incentive or ability to tell the truth about casualties. Like they even know. So the other thing about I don't know if you didn't, but in Michigan last night, so they had there was like vote uncommitted or something if you're mad at Biden about Israel, right? That's why he called for the ceasefire, because he was trying to tamp down the uncommitted vote in Michigan and for the primary. So it's like, their whole thing is, which way is the wind blowing? What would help me politically? There's no, known principles or ideals. Like they're for war here, they're against war there, ceasefire on one side. It's just like whatever he thinks leftists want to hear, right? But he's stuck on these things. He's stuck in the middle of this one. He can't get out of this because the 70% of the country is for Israel. So you're going against 70% of the country, and you don't really have a case to make. So last night was something like 15% of the people in Michigan voted for uncommitted because over this issue, right? Dearborn and the collar suburbs around Detroit are heavily Muslim population, right? Think about their congressperson is Rashida Tlaib. So you're talking about they're for the ceasefire, and they're for the terrorists and all this kind of stuff, and so that's what you're dealing with. And so he can't get out of this. He has to lean on Israel, and the country, 70% of the country is like so what you say, who attacked who here?
Yeah, I mean, Biden still coasted to victory in Michigan, but I think it was disconcerting to the Democrats, or should be disconcerting to them, that that so many people actually voted for the uncommitted. I think they were expecting like maybe 10,000 people, but they got over 100,000, I think.
Yeah.
So that's not an inconsequential number. You don't know for sure whether or not if that translates into people who just won't vote for Biden, come November in Michigan. But it could. any even a slice of that is trouble. Michigan,
Right.
Michigan.
And it's not just Muslims. It's like it's really hurting with the young vote, right? Polls out this week. Trump has basically pulled even with him, well within the margin of error in polling for support of below 30. Okay, if Trump wins below 30, it's over, right? Biden has to sweep below 30, and he's not going to do it. He's not going to come close, and that's because young people disapprove of his handling of this issue. He can't get out of it. It's one, it's the same as the green stuff. It's like you're the craziest people in your party are pulling really hard one way, and that's the way he goes.
Yeah, I'm beginning to really, as we're good 3 years into this Biden administration here, that you can really see the effects of what happens when you basically turn your administration, your policy over to the left, that you do not actually toe your own path there. And so he's put this DEI cabinet in place. Virtually every policy that comes down the pipeline is driven by some left-wing nut somewhere or group and things like this. And that makes him even more beholden to those people going along. So now all of these things, he's basically boxed himself in so many different ways that if when you're looking at the broader electorate, this is hard. I mean, where does he go with this? Right. I mean, so the voters, I mean, if they look at Biden, just on policy, they're just like, this is not what we expected. I mean, not the way that Joe, basically pitched himself.
Right. A lot of leftists say that for a variety of reasons, but a lot of them are like, we didn't get what we wanted out of this presidency. So now, are they going to vote for Trump? I mean, if some will, but most won't, right? Although it looks like at least 2 times as many people are switching from Biden to Trump as are switching from Trump to Biden. So some of them are coming his way. But, most of them, they're just not going to vote. And they're not going to get their neighbors to vote. They're not going to put signs in the yard. They're not going to walk blocks and knock doors and all that kind of stuff. And that's where the difference will make. They have a bad enthusiasm problem, which that particular problem hurts you down ballot, right? Because you're also not walking precincts for congressional candidates, Senate candidates, and so forth. So, from what we can tell now, it looks like the Republicans will control the Senate in the next Congress. They could control the House a little harder because of the redistricting that's gone on several places. But, they look in pretty good shape at the Senate. And in the House, they can still pull out if they, if A, the speaker holds the line on Ukraine funding and the border, and B, if they come up with a coherent plan to win for these people and can raise some money, right? I think a big thing that happened last week is they finally got rid of Ronna McDaniel. And I think people don't understand how big a deal that is. In the 2022 midterms, Herschel Walker, he barely lost. Everybody blamed it on Trump. He was outfunded 8-1. Oz outfunded 11-1 in Pennsylvania. Yeah, he lost. He was Trump's candidate and he lost. It was all Trump's fault. But he was outfunded 11-1. So, Blake Masters, outfunded 10 or 11-1, right, in Arizona. So, I mean, that's 3 that you could have had if you'd been, anywhere close to parity on fundraising, right? And so we just haven't done that, and it's been completely neglected. And now, I think Scott Presler and people like him are getting better at identifying people who might not be on the voter rolls, but you could register them and then they'd support you. Presler says there's 50,000 unregistered gun owners in Wisconsin, people who own guns but are not registered to vote. So if you own a gun, there's a pretty good propensity for being a Republican voter.
Yeah, I mean, I think, McDaniel, I mean, she and Trump had a good relationship at the beginning, but that deteriorated. A lot of those things, it's very typical of relationships with Trump. They start off good and they go south pretty quickly in a lot of cases. But, the RNC chairs, I mean, in the end, look, that's where the buck stops for Republicans and for their success. He's like, she's the leader. I mean, she's got to get them to raise the money. They got to recruit the right candidates and all of these kinds of things. and the track record, unfortunately, has just not been good. And she barely survived her last election, anyway.
Right.
So I think she already saw the handwriting on the wall that she was losing her grip over the RNC anyway at this point. And
Trump told her to get out too.
Yeah, I mean, it was
helps.
Yeah, there was no path for her to stay on very long. So she's getting out of the way. Trump will get someone that he likes in there. Whether or not that's going to make a difference, I don't know, but we'll see. I mean, it's I mean,
he's
the RNC,
getting a guy who runs North Carolina GOP.
North Carolina. I mean, after all, the RNC put in Michael Steele, and that was kind of
right. And but I mean, that kind of showed what the people who were running the Republican Party at that time, a lot of whom are still around trying to run stuff, thought of the people who voted for it. Right. I mean, they got a guy who had no connection to what we did. Right. He was, ostensibly a Republican. But they're that's the wing of the party that's always like, if we can just get a few Democrats to come over, that's not how that works, right? They're not going to come over. They don't come over, right? You're tilting at windmills. Yeah,
I mean, you get some candidates that do some party switching in both ways, but it's a very small number in any given year. So that that's not going to really tilt the balance too much anywhere. But you've got to be able to raise money. And support those candidates, and if you can't do it, it's pretty bad. I mean, I can look at my backyard here in Montgomery County. It's hard to find candidates to run in Montgomery County for anything, and when they do, they think which is not unusual. They think, okay, they go to the Central Committee and say, can you help me? And the Central Committee has like very little money, and they can't do anything but try. But basically, the answer has been for decades is just that you've got to do it on your own. Well, that's one reason that these candidates lose, besides the fact that we're massively out-registered. But they also, you put a newbie candidate in there, someone who's never run for office before. They try to put together any kind of campaign team, and then they're trying to raise money, from scratch without any experience. Most of the campaign people around here don't have a ton of experience, and definitely don't have experience winning campaigns on top of that. So it's
begats winning. It's also the most gerrymandered state in the union.
Yeah, no, it's terribly gerrymandered. But I mean, this is where Larry Hogan can help break the dam a little bit again. I mean, he gave Republicans hope, while he was governor of Maryland, that they could do some things. And, they I think, the local offices in the more conservative areas got more conservative. And I think that's because Republicans got a lot more active there. Even in Montgomery County, the Republicans tried, I mean, against all odds, but they at least seem to be rather more enthused and about trying to do things, and find Republicans to run and get elected in Montgomery County than they had in the past, because Hogan was the governor. At least you had the head of the government in the state of Maryland was a Republican. So it gave you hope. That was like, if he can win statewide, how do we figure a way to break this logjam in Montgomery County? Well, you got to find a lot more people. You got to find the right candidate. You're basically in Montgomery County. You have to find, I think we talked about this last week. You have to have kind of the Mac Mathias, Connie Morellas of the world. It's the only way you even get a reasonable chance of competing is for somebody, who's going to get 45%. Maybe they'll get 50% of the votes, or a little bit over. Maybe they'll tip it over. Or you find, District 6, I think, is, it'll be competitive, and Republicans might win CD6 this year. They've been knocking on that door several times. David Trone's going to run for Senate, so that's open again. Gives them
almost beat him last time. So.
Yeah, it gives them an opening, but it's the Democrats. They have, with fundraising and registration, their advantage is hard to beat. But in
the case of CD6, okay, so people who don't know Maryland, so CD6 is. Maryland's a long panhandle state, right? CD6 is the farthest west district. It's all the way out to where you're closer to Ohio than you are to Virginia, right? It's that far out. So But they so it was usually in Republican hands. It was for many years a guy named Roscoe Bartlett, who was one of the three doctors in the House, and sort of a strange guy, but he was a Republican, and he was on that lived out there and served that district well, and it held that seat for a long time. And then so they started adding to the district, like coming down toward DC, right? So, coming down the curve toward DC, toward the Potomac River. So they kept adding until they got enough to where it's a Democrat district, right? And that's just blatant. Those, the suburban dwellers of Montgomery County and the people that live in the mountains in Western Maryland, that is when they talk about, districts that don't have things in common. I mean, that's the epitome of that, right? And so they've added all this stuff to this district till it's a Democrat district, and then it's good. It's always going to be close, and it matters. Candidate quality matters there. So the last cycle, the Republicans had a good candidate. He led for like 2 or 3 days until they found enough votes for Trone, who's a good candidate. He doesn't look like a insane person or whatever. And, he's a businessman. Everybody goes, or a lot of people go to his store, Total Wine and so forth. So, he knows, he's a guy, they forced the Democrats to put up a good candidate there. And I'm not sure that they have another one behind him now. Right.
Yeah. I can't remember who's going to run in 6, but there'll probably be several. I mean, anytime you have an open seat like that, then, a lot of people jump in, and in the Senate race, several of Hogan's challengers have dropped out. I think they're just like, they want to pave the way for Larry at this point and not wind up, so he doesn't have to spend money unnecessarily in a primary battle. Go right for the general election, save your money there, your ammo, and use it.
So one of the things that happens though, so before we move on to that, so who are they talking about running against Hogan? Right, their bench is not deep, right? It's because most of them, they're not on the bench, they're in the game, but the bench of people sitting around to run for the seat, who is it? Who's running against him? Yeah. Who are the Democrats? Do you know?
Well, I mean, Trone is one.
Trone is one, but I mean, is there anyone else?
I think there's some more candidates, but I don't know who they are. And that, I mean, but the thing about Trone is that Trone has got almost unlimited money in a sense. I mean, he's probably going to be the wealthiest of the group, running in there. And, Hogan, because Hogan has can be a moderate type of Republican, and he hasn't, he has no relations really with Trump whatsoever. It makes it harder for the Democrats, to fight against him.
You don't get that MAGA energy.
No, you don't get that and Republicans do want a Republican senator in there. I mean, it'll make a huge difference of having a Republican senator. We need those numbers in the Senate. Could flip the Senate. So there's a lot of considerations there, but it's going to be like, and 8 years of Hogan were good. So people, he went out with very high popularity ratings and everything like this. So it's hard. You can't paint Larry Hogan as some right wing, MAGA or radical or anything like this. So that won't work. So the Democrats are going to have a fight on their hands, I think, in the Senate race. And I'm crossing my fingers and wishing Larry well on this, that he can find a path to victory there. But it'll depend upon a lot of things too. As you mentioned, I mean, this enthusiasm gap, across the country for Biden, a little bit of a cut in that enthusiasm gap, hurts all the down ballots, as you said. So guys like David Trone or whoever wants to be the nominee, all the other House candidates, the ones that are that were in close races that barely won or barely, things can change, because if people are not, if they're not enthused about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, which is now more the case than ever, then they're, the chances that they're going to vote at all are getting to be slim.
That's right.
Right. And so all those down ballots.
You also have, you have 125,000 Jews in Montgomery County. You have, that's going to be a problem for Biden too, and a bunch of Jews in Baltimore County. So You know, and he's not doing what they want. He's not, you know, he's not for Israel. Now that, you know, some Jews don't, you know, they vote against Israel, so it's not, you don't lose 100% of the vote there. But you know, a lot of them, those are people who, you know, are going to decide that day not whether to vote for Biden or Trump, but whether to go to the polls or not. So, you know, if they decide no, then that probably hurts Trump.
Right. All right. So we have, you know, we've kind of mentioned Trump's victory in Michigan, but he, you know, he previous to that, over the weekend he won South Carolina, Nikki Haley's home state. You know, he's easily winning these things. I mean, Haley still. I mean, I think she overperformed her polls in South Carolina. You know,
by 1/10 of a point.
Well, it depends upon which poll, I guess. But anyway, it's the thing is, the bottom line really is that, I mean, she attracted some support. It's not enough to win the nomination by any stretch of imagination. Americans for Prosperity Action is pulling the funding. You know, we have Super Tuesday coming up, which I guess is her final, you know, grand finale of let it roll there and then see what happens and then officially suspend her campaign or whatever at that point. You know, it's kind of as if like kind of waiting, whether or not she's waiting to see if Trump, you know, has some medical emergency or something and is forced to drop out, or gets convicted and people say no, you can't run, and then she's waiting in the wings. But she's really, I think Ron DeSantis is more number two than, you know, than Nikki Haley would be at this point. You know, if for some reason Trump couldn't be the candidate, I think more people would gravitate to DeSantis than they would to Haley.
I would think so too. And there was some talk, a couple stories out this week saying that DeSantis is in fact kind of running a shadow campaign, that he really meant about suspended and not ended, that he's, you know, he's sort of anchored out.
And then remember, you know, that's always the terminology usually is that they hedge their bets by saying suspended, right? So that way,
right. And also it removes some legal obligations. You don't yet have to pay, you know, in the get out of campaign. You don't have to get out of campaign mode and start paying off stuff, whatever. Yeah. So there's some legal reasons they do it, but you know, I think he really meant, you know, according to these stories, he really meant suspend. So, you know, Trump is I think he has broken the record for vote totals in all four of the primaries so far. So he is getting overwhelming support. He is also getting people being willing to go to the polls in the cold, in the winter, in the rain, whatever. You know, in Iowa, it was below zero, right? People are trooping out in the winter, dead of winter, to vote for him. So in huge numbers and never before seen numbers. So, you know, she can hang on, and it looks like about half of her support, maybe a little less, comes from Democrats. There's unprecedented Democrat attempts to meddle in the election this year. For people who say that, you know, we hope we run against Trump because we think he'd be the easiest one to beat, they sure are acting funny, right? Because they seem to, you know, orchestrate some kind of campaign to hold down Trump's numbers, you know. And I really saw, you know, Rick Wilson, who is probably the biggest Trump hater on all of X these days, is you know, he's like, what, you know, what's wrong with Trump? You know, why can't he get to 75%? What kind of loser is he? And I'm like, okay, if your benchmark is the guy's got to get 75% of the vote for you to consider him to have been successful in that election, that kind of tells you that, you know, he's moved the needle on what moved the pile on, you know, what is considered success, right? 74% is not success. You know what I mean? So, but he's around 70, I guess, in Michigan now. He's going to get to 70 by the time it's all done.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things about these primaries too, is just that, you know, for these pundits and whatever, the critics of Trump, is that the bar is higher than the vote total. It's like, you know, he can be in the 70s, but it's not good enough. You know, it's like,
right.
You know, they want to say, well, you know, in order for you know, he's a former president of the United States. You know, he should be getting 80, 85% or 90% or whatever. You know, those are possible, but they're still opponents are, you know, Nikki Haley is still
she's a credible opponent. She's a two-term senator. She was a UN ambassador. I mean, two-term governor. I mean, she was a UN ambassador. You know, she's not chopped liver. She's not Marianne Williamson, you know, holding seances or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, you got to take that seriously.
Yeah, actually, seances might help Biden. I don't know. Maybe that'll help him regain his memory. I don't know.
Uh, Talk to all
So,
the Klan members he gave eulogies for.
so I mean, it's an interesting time. I mean, this will by next Tuesday, you know, it should be all said and done, right? I mean, we should basically have our two candidates. They, more or less. I mean, Haley won't have the wherewithal. She can't hang on after that. There's really no reason for her to continue past next Tuesday. Um, the money's not really going to be there for her to continue past that, and then that'll begin. And we'll really see kind of a campaign season. I mean, there'll still be some more primaries, but that it really won't matter that much at the point. They'll just be gathering delegates and racing towards the convention, getting the official nomination, and moving on to the election. But this will be a very long campaign season in that sense. Is that Super Tuesday becomes the kind of the real marker, and they go for it. And I just hope that for that roughly 8-month period, between Super Tuesday and Election Day, that Trump focuses on the issues, and things that the Biden administration has done wrong, all these things like this. He doesn't have to get into personal attacks on other people. He doesn't necessarily have to get into these judicial issues in terms of the that kind of stuff, unless for some reason it pops back up as something else we need to see. Because I think some people are tired of it, and I think there are some people who've realized is that the campaign against Trump with all these court cases was this was political vendettas. I mean, it was all political.
Right, that's right. He's got all the wind on his back. The only thing is it's like Tyson fighting Buster Douglas. He should win. He should beat the crap out of him, right? But if he doesn't play defense, if he doesn't, if he gets not careful, right? If he gets careless, the Biden could land one knockout punch in the fight. Okay, that's really the big danger is to I think that's why Trump didn't debate. He's trying not to make any mistakes. The people need to understand this. The people handling Trump, both in terms of the campaign and in terms of setting him up policy-wise, should he win, he went from a inexperienced team of bomb throwers to an experienced team of good quality political people. And I think that I think he realized that mistakes hurt him, right? It's unforced errors, own goals, so to speak. And I think he has taken steps to address that, to make sure that doesn't happen again. And if you look at the people who are in charge of his campaign and running the show right now, for instance, you don't see as many rallies. You see some rallies, but you don't see as many because, the campaign director told him it costs you $500,000 a pop. So anytime you're ready to blow $500,000, we can do one, but money might be better spent on other stuff. So, they have Trump doing this. They seem to be looking more at, grassroots, how to turn out the vote and so forth than they ever did before. So I think you're going to see a component of organization brought to it that you didn't see in 2016 or 2020, just because of the people he has around him.
With the primaries, once we get past Super Tuesday, I mean, will there be a lot of campaigning by either side initially, or will they wait till closer to November and then pick it up there? I mean,
well, there's still some primaries, as you say,
right.
And then it becomes a battle for momentum. Like right now, Trump controls all the momentum. So if he ignores late primaries or whatever, I mean, it'll get to a point where it won't matter. But if he allows a case to be made that his support is fading or whatever, that will be magnified as a bad thing, right, for him in ways that it necessarily wouldn't for other candidates. He needs to keep showing, upward growth the whole rest of the campaign.
I mean, he can use surrogates to do some stuff, right?
And then and he will. I think Vivek will be a busy man between now and November.
Right. If they see some flagging support, they just bring in Trump himself and boost it. kind of a thing like that. When as they watch all of that. So are we going to have a presidential debate between Biden and Trump?
Well, I don't think that Biden can say no the whole time. I think that answers the question for America about whether he's too old to serve. So I think at some point he has to, as bad as they're going to hate it, he has to take the risk and do
it. And Trump, and once again, as long as Trump, doesn't commit a lot of unforced errors, as you said, he can be his own worst enemy with things that he does. He could open up a huge gap between him and Biden, if they play their cards right.
Right. Well, here's the thing about that. Okay, so let's recall 2020. All he had to do was curb stomp him in the debate then too, right? But so he told all the word sort of got out. Biden can barely talk. He's campaigning in his basement. He spits all over himself. He can't form a coherent thought. Then he got to the debate, and he didn't really do anything fantastic in the debate. He didn't really make any points that, totally drove a stake in Trump's case to be president or whatever. But he wasn't spitting all over himself and doddering and unable to form a coherent thought. He did show up and participate in the debate. And so, at times Biden's pretty sharp. He's on his game, right? People say they drug him up or whatever. I don't know, how they do it, but sometimes he's more with it than he is at others for whatever reason. So, and I think you can count on if he gets in a debate with Trump, he's going to show up with whatever, drugs he does or whatever he does to get himself, able to be coherent, and he'll be coherent that day. So you'll have to deal with him, debate him, expect for him to be coherent and on the ball and give the answers that he gives, and be prepared for him to be at the very top of his game, right? It's easy. There's a lot of stuff to go after about, like, for instance, the latest one I love is that, I guess he was on one of the late night shows, and the guy asked him about being old. He goes, seriously, what's the deal? People say you're too old. He goes, well, my opponent cannot remember his wife's name. Okay, that's another. Biden knows that's a lie, right? They're talking about at CPAC. So Trump comes out. I don't know. Are you followed all this? Have you followed all this?
I saw a little bit about this.
Okay, I heard so they come out of at CPAC. Biden and Trump is talking about. He's talking about Melania. He's Melania. Isn't she wonderful? And the crowd starts clapping. And then he says, "See Mercedes, they love her." Okay, now you and me know that he's talking to Mercedes Schlapp, right? Who her and her husband run CPAC. Okay, so the media has run wild. He doesn't know his wife's name. He called her Mercedes. Like, no, he didn't. He called Mercedes Schlapp Mercedes. And the reason he did that is because that's her name. So, so now, there's this, Biden gets on TV and they're like, yeah, the other guy can't remember his wife's name. That's a lie. It's like, he said he got into the 2020 campaign because Trump, the very fine people thing, right? That was a lie, right? He said he got into the 2024 campaign because of the suckers and losers hoax. That's also a lie, right? Does this guy ever tell the truth about anything?
Yeah. So I mean, the other thing that'll be key in a debate too is who the moderator is.
Right. Exactly. They need to get him a decent moderator.
Yeah. Yeah. And
it's got to be outside of Joe's comfort zone, because it's always outside of Trump's.
Because I'm sure depending upon who certain moderators, if they announce a moderator pick, it's not to Trump's liking, we will hear about it.
Right. And they're going to try to. That's the other problem is on the debate is, like, I'm not sure how they would run that, because Trump has said that the Commission on Presidential Debates, he's not doing any more business with them because he's had enough of their rigged moderator stuff too. So, yeah. But who could we get? Who's out there that both sides would find credible?
Yeah, that's going to be part of the trick there and everything like that. Yeah. But we shall see. Stay tuned, everyone, about that. The big news too, though, was that Ryan Binkley suspended his campaign.
I had to go look up who Ryan Binkley was.
It's pretty funny. It's like, did anybody remember he was actually still officially running?
He had 80,000 contributors though, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty fun. I mean, he ran a Facebook campaign, right? I mean, I know his ad popped up there and stuff like that. More power to him. I mean, the thing about these guys to me is just I always think about this is like even though you're going absolutely nowhere, you by filing, declaring, and raising some money and doing kind of following through there, and then when you end your campaign, you end the campaign, you can always put on your resume, former presidential candidate, right?
Yeah, that's
And
right.
so
I never put that on my resume.
yeah, it might be a little toxic now, which is what Bob Costas thinks that Trump supporters are. It's a toxic cult. Thoughts?
The people who think guys can have babies, drag queens belong in schools, the world's going to be destroyed in 10 years by global warming, and the border is closed, tell us that we belong in a cult. Right? No, no, we don't. You do. To be a leftist these days, you're asked to not know, but believe a lot of things that are transparently, obviously not true. Right? As you know, I guess over in Virginia, you may have heard we have a little controversy about that because the lieutenant governor referred to one of the state senators who happens to be a tranny as sir, when they have transitioned into being ma'am, supposedly. And so, we're not playing your mental illness games anymore. So, it's like you're there as a leftist, you're asked to believe a lot of things that there's no chance of being true. And, but we're the cult. I don't get it.
Hey, maybe I should add to the opening the toxic cultists.
Toxic cultists, definitely.
I'll have to think about that.
Yeah. Plus, what is Bob Costas doing talking about this? What does he know?
Yeah, no, I mean, once again, it's kind of like, why are these people venturing over into this field that they're not, it's like, I've always, as a sports guy, I mean, Bob Costas has been, he's been out there for a long time. He's
annoying. He was so annoying they took him off of TV, and now he comes back with political commentary.
Yeah. So now he's trying to become the political pundit all of a sudden. Forget it. So, I mean, your prediction, Congress will avoid a partial shutdown. I mean, we kind of
looks like he's working on that. Johnson looks like he's working on soft place to land to keep the government.
I mean, once again, I wouldn't be surprised to see them, create something that's kind of a CR that they'll kick the can down the road and buy themselves more time to solve the situation.
That's what they need to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very typical thing that is. It's just that sometimes I look in the media and it's just like all this panic. Partial government shutdown could occur in 4 days. I'm like, yeah, probably not likely.
Yeah, I mean, and if it is, it'll be brief, right? It'll just be until they get around to getting the final versions of things, But the thing about it is a chance for Johnson, and I would not blame him if he did this, but a lot of Republicans probably would, to make a deal that gets us past the election.
Right.
And we don't want to keep doing this every 2 or 3 months till the election, right? Because sometimes it lands on you're the one who can say, hey, we'd be happy to pass this if only it included X, Y, and Z, and they have no choice but to rush out and include X, Y, and Z, But it could land on they can stick it to us like that too. So that's what I'm saying. Keep that momentum going in the right direction. Don't do anything that gets us off where we are right now.
Okay. All right. Last topic quickly, which is Supreme Court is hearing arguments on these laws on social media in Texas and Florida. I guess we're seeing that they're kind of skeptical about the validity, constitutionality of those laws. This is always the Section 230. This has always been kind of tricky, right? I mean,
it is tricky because what it says basically is the social media platforms are not the person saying whatever you say in your tweet. You say, Biden is in love with dogs or whatever, or has whatever it is you say. It's cheats on his wife. Okay, there's a good one. Biden cheats on his wife. Okay, so if we find that to be false and defamatory, we're going to sue somebody. Who do we sue? Do we sue Twitter, who allowed you to tweet it, or do we sue you for tweeting it? And what Section 230 says right now is we sue you, right? You're the tweeter, and Twitter and whoever is just, hey, we're just platform. You just put your stuff up, right? We're passively providing a place to publish, basically your opinion, however stupid it may be. Okay. Now, if you're going to go in and censor comments, right? Which, Twitter was famous for doing, and is still doing to some degree, but it was famous for doing under the previous management, as well as Facebook and YouTube and all these other leftist social media entities, right? Then, the person who censors is an editor, right? You're deciding what goes in the paper. You're no longer a passive operator of a platform. You're editing. Okay. So you can either censor or you can be a passive publisher, but you can't be both. And so that's what they're trying to do. So I don't care which way the court decides, but once and for all, tell us what the deal is. And then if you tell us that the social media companies can't be sued, then you got to tell the social media companies that they cannot censor, even and especially on behalf of the government, which is the case now.
Right. Okay. All right. Why don't you wrap it up?
Okay. Let me look at our list of things. So I get to the AFP funding for Nikki. It was mostly it wasn't really cash as much as it was people on the ground, which makes your campaign look strong. So it's a bigger deal than it seems. Social media. So the Supreme Court is also looking at Chevron. We should have a decision on that pretty soon. Chevron deference. So what that means is, there was an oil field in Ecuador that Texaco owned. They sold it to Chevron, and the condition of the sale was that Chevron clean it up. So Chevron goes down there and cleans it up, and then the EPA says, "Well, it's not as clean as we want it to be." So they go to court, and the court said, "Okay, we're not going down to Ecuador to test the soil. What we're going to do is say, if the agency says that it's not cleaned up, it's not cleaned up. If they're faithfully executing the laws, then we're going to back the agency." Okay, so that has enabled agencies to run wild in the streets with regulations that can't be opposed because, hey, the agencies are always right under Chevron. So yeah, the regulatory people are freaking out about this, and they are right to freak out. And I hope that they have even more to freak out about upon this thing. As for the SAT, I think, you got to have something that you can let people in school for. Schools they went away from the SAT. They realized they can't tell who would actually succeed in their college. So now they are restoring the SAT. Vice media, it would be fun to say that because they're leftist, they've lost all their audience. And certainly leftist outlets are doing worse than conservative outlets now. But as you know, that's a tough business, and a lot of people go out of business in it for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, BuzzFeed has had the same problem. So these guys that popped up in the, during that point in time when doing this digital media stuff was very popular from the left, took a lot of that space, but they have now just kind of fallen on their face.
Yeah, retreated a lot.
Yep. All right, everyone. Thanks once again for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it. Please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world, and do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America, and we will see you again next week.